For 3 weeks, I thought I was the happiest woman alive, until I turned the corner and saw my husband holding another woman like he used to hold me. Everything was a lie. Have you ever wondered what it feels like when the universe hands you everything you ever prayed for, only to carefully lay a minefield right beneath your feet? Imagine a quiet, rainy Tuesday afternoon in downtown Seattle. The kind of day when the rest of the world fades into a gray blur, and you find yourself sitting in a small, sunlit corner of an independent neighborhood coffee shop, sketching intricate architectural wireframes in a leather-bound notebook. The rich, warm scent of roasted espresso beans and damp asphalt fills the air. Outside, the rain taps a steady rhythm against the glass. And then, he walks in. It wasn't just a meeting. It was an impact. A sudden, magnetic jolt of love at first sight that made time itself stand still. Their eyes locked across the room through the steam of the espresso machine, and within seconds, he was walking toward her table. Julian. Tall, with an effortless, tailored confidence, a sharp jawline, and a breathtaking, disarming smile. He didn't use a cheesy pickup line. He simply pulled out the chair opposite her, looked down at her architectural sketches with genuine awe, and said he couldn't possibly walk out of that door without knowing the name of the woman whose eyes held entire galaxies. That single moment altered the trajectory of her life forever. Elena was a brilliant, self-made engineer, a visionary mind behind advanced green tech software and sustainable urban energy grids. But she lived mostly in her own head, wrapped in algorithms and code, isolated from the superficial sharks of high society. Julian felt like a warm, brilliant sun breaking through years of winter. A whirlwind romance followed, moving at a terrifying, intoxicating speed. Just 30 days of absolute magic. Late-night rooftop conversations overlooking the glittering city skyline, whispered promises under blankets of stars, and a fierce, consuming certainty that they were two halves of the same soul. Julian made her feel invincible. He listened to her ideas about saving the planet with a reverence that melted her heart. And then came the 31st day. It happened right there in the very same coffee shop where they first met. Julian arranged for the entire place to be closed off, lit by hundreds of soft candles. As the string quartet played a quiet melody in the background, he dropped gracefully to one knee, holding out a stunning, bespoke diamond ring that sparkled like liquid ice. Tears of absolute, unadulterated joy filled Elena's eyes. She didn't hesitate for a microsecond. She threw her arms around his neck, whispering, "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." She gave him her heart, her absolute trust, her deepest secrets, and her entire world. She just didn't have the faintest, darkest idea that she was handing over the keys to her own execution. The first few months of their engagement felt like a continuous, breathtaking ascent into a cloudless sky. Elena was completely submerged in her work, pouring every ounce of her genius into her revolutionary green tech startup, EcoGrid Solutions. Her software was designed to optimize urban power distribution, reducing energy waste by over 40%. It was a multi-million-dollar technology, a genuine breakthrough that caught the attention of major municipal leaders and international venture capitalists. However, there was one glaring truth about Elena. While she was a technical titan, a master coder who could architect complex algorithmic matrices in her sleep, she abhorred the ruthless, shark-infested waters of corporate politics. She hated negotiations, legal jargon, and the manipulative handshakes of high society boardrooms. Julian noticed this vulnerability immediately, wrapping it in the sweet, deceptive guise of protective devotion. "My love," Julian would say, gently kissing her forehead as she sat hunched over her dual monitors past midnight, rubbing her tired eyes. "You shouldn't have to deal with these corporate hyenas. Let me handle the paperwork. Let me be the CEO, the legal face, the shield between you and the cold, cruel world of business. You just keep doing what you do best, being a genius. We're building our empire together anyway. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine." Blinded by absolute love and a naive trust that never once questioned his motives, Elena signed over the structural management rights. Julian formally became the CEO and managing director of EcoGrid Solutions, while Elena remained the invisible engine, the CTO whose name was buried deep within proprietary patent footnotes, but whose source code powered the entire corporate valuation. And then there was Victoria. Victoria was Elena's closest confidant, a sleek, ambitious, and ruthlessly sharp public relations strategist whom Elena had known since their university days. When EcoGrid Solutions began scaling rapidly and attracting global media attention, Elena insisted on bringing Victoria onto the team to handle corporate communications and investor relations. "We need someone we can trust implicitly," Elena had told Julian over dinner one evening, completely unaware of the irony. "And Victoria is like a sister to me. She knows how to spin a narrative and protect our brand." Julian had smiled, a smooth, unreadable expression flashing across his face for a split second before he nodded in agreement. "Of course, sweetheart. If she's your sister, she's family to me too." For months, the three of them were inseparable. Whenever Julian had to stay late at the corporate headquarters reviewing international contracts or preparing pitch decks for upcoming venture capital summits, Victoria was right there by his side, coordinating press releases and managing late-night strategy meetings. Elena felt like the luckiest woman alive. She believed she had it all: a breathtaking, passionate romance with a man who worshipped her, a world-changing career, and an unbreakable circle of loyalty. She did not know that trust was the ultimate currency in a high-stakes casino, and she had just handed all her chips across the table to two people who were playing a completely different game. Beneath the polished veneer of corporate dinners, high-end galas, and romantic weekends, a quiet, devastating trap was being constructed. Julian's holding company, Vanguard Holdings, had been on the verge of total, catastrophic bankruptcy before he met Elena. His previous investments had crashed, leaving him drowning in millions of dollars of unpayable debt. EcoGrid Solutions wasn't just a successful business venture to him, it was his literal life raft. And once he climbed aboard, his primary objective wasn't to share the boat with Elena. It was to throw her overboard. The wedding was now just 72 hours away. The historic Grand Estate booked for the ceremony was a chaotic, beautiful flurry of high-end floral arrangements, imported French linens, heavy cardstock invitations embossed in gold leaf, and the quiet, nervous anticipation of an elite guest list. At the center of it all was Elena, trying to stay calm amidst the whirlwind of dress fittings, final caterer tastings, and seating chart adjustments. Yet, over the past few weeks, a subtle, cold intuition had begun to gnaw at the back of her mind. A persistent whisper that something wasn't quite right. Julian had changed. Just slightly, but enough for a sharp observer to notice. He was spending less time looking at her with that intense, adoring gaze that had captured her heart in the coffee shop, and far more time locked away in his private study, murmuring in low, guarded tones over his phone. Whenever she walked into the room, he would abruptly switch screens or hang up, smoothing over the tension with a practiced, dazzling smile and a reassuring kiss on her forehead. "The stress of the merger and the upcoming multi-million-dollar venture capital infusion is getting to me, my love," Julian would murmur, playing the part of the exhausted, dedicated fiancé to perfection. "I just want everything to be absolute perfection for you, for us." And then there was Victoria. Her calls had become shorter, her text messages clipped and distant. Whenever Elena tried to loop her into final wedding planning details, Victoria always had an excuse: an urgent media crisis, an investor meeting running late, or an unexpected corporate emergency that required her immediate attention at the main headquarters downtown. It was a Tuesday night, almost exactly 1 month since that fateful rainy afternoon when she and Julian first locked eyes. Elena sat at her home desk, surrounded by architectural blueprints and system error logs she was debugging for the upcoming software rollout. By midnight, she realized she had left her custom corporate security token and a set of master administrative flash drives on her executive desk at the EcoGrid Solutions downtown headquarters. Without those drives, her lead development team wouldn't be able to run the final pre-launch diagnostics scheduled for early Wednesday morning. Sighing, she grabbed her coat, stepped out into the chilly midnight air, and drove downtown through the empty, rain-slicked streets. The corporate headquarters of EcoGrid Solutions occupies the top 3 floors of a sleek, glass and steel high-rise overlooking the bay. At this hour, the massive building was a tomb of silence, save for the low, rhythmic hum of the centralized air conditioning and the soft blue glow of emergency lights. Elena swiped her security badge at the private elevator, rode it up to the executive floor, and stepped out onto the plush, sound-dampened carpets. The hallway was pitch black. Quietly, she walked toward her office suite, her soft footsteps muffled by the thick flooring. As she approached the corner leading to the executive suites, she noticed something strange. A thin, golden sliver of light was spilling out from beneath the heavy, double-oak doors of Julian's private corner office. He's still working, she thought, a wave of affectionate guilt washing over her. The poor man is literally killing himself to secure our future. She picked up her pace, a warm smile forming on her lips, intending to slip inside, set a cup of hot espresso on his desk, and tell him it was time to come home. But as she drew within 3 feet of the slightly ajar doorway, a sound hit her ears. It wasn't the click of a keyboard. It wasn't the murmur of an international conference call. It was laughter. A soft, intimate, mocking sound that froze the blood in her veins. And then came Victoria's voice, dripping with casual familiarity. Honestly, Julian, sometimes I almost feel sorry for her. She sits there coding day and night, completely convinced you're madly in love with her, while we're literally dividing up her multi-million-dollar empire before the ink on the marriage license is even dry. Elena's hand, which had been raised to push the door open, stopped dead in midair. Her entire body turned to stone. Inside the office, Julian's voice sliced through the heavy silence, cold, sharp, and stripped of every single ounce of warmth, affection, and humanity she thought she knew. Elena stood paralyzed in the corridor, her fingers hovering just inches from the heavy oak door. The air in the hallway felt suddenly thick, suffocating, and freezing cold. Every memory of their first meeting in the coffee shop, every whispered promise under the stars, every warm smile and tender touch violently shattered inside her mind like cheap glass. Inside the office, Julian let out a low, arrogant chuckle that sounded like nails scraping across metal. Feel sorry for her? Julian's voice echoed, dripping with pure, unadulterated contempt. Victoria, let's be entirely realistic. If it wasn't for her green tech startup, my holding company would have been liquidated by federal banks 6 months ago. Her patents, her algorithms, her unyielding technical genius, that is the only reason I am standing here today. I needed her brains and her capital to bail me out of my own financial grave. Victoria let out another soft, mocking laugh, the sound grating sharply against Elena's ears. And what about the wedding? Victoria asked, her tone teasing and possessive. Are you actually ready to tie yourself to the emotional artist? The wedding is just a necessary corporate formality, Julian replied smoothly, a tone of absolute calculation in his voice. It locks down her absolute loyalty and secures her familial ties to the board of directors. Once the final ownership transfer documents are signed tomorrow morning before the ceremony, EcoGrid Solutions will be legally anchored under Vanguard Holdings. She can play the happy, naive figurehead wife in public, while you and I control the real assets, the global contracts, and the future profits. And if she ever finds out? Victoria pressed. Finds out what? Julian scoffed, his arrogance swelling. She's a brilliant engineer, Victoria, but when it comes to the real world, she's blind. She trusts blindly. She loves blindly, and she signs whatever I put in front of her because she thinks love conquers all. By the time she realizes she's been completely stripped of her own company, the ink will be dry, the marriage will be registered, and she won't have a single legal leg to stand on in any court in the country. Outside in the hallway, Elena closed her eyes. For 3 agonizing seconds, there was a profound, terrifying stillness inside her soul. There were no tears, no breathless gasps of shock, no sudden urge to burst through the doors, scream, hurl accusations, or throw ceramic mugs at their heads. The raw, agonizing pain of betrayal burned so hot and fast that it instantly cauterized every vulnerable emotion within her. When she opened her eyes again, they weren't the eyes of the gentle, creative girl who had fallen in love in a coffee shop a month ago. They were cold, razor-sharp, completely devoid of warmth, and radiating an icy, calculating brilliance. A ghost of a smile touched the corners of her lips. A dangerous, terrifying smile. "You want complete control?" she thought, her mind instantly shifting from heartbreak to tactical warfare. "You want my life's work wrapped in a neat little package? I'll give you everything you're asking for. And then I'll watch your entire world burn to absolute ash." Quietly, silently, Elena turned on her heel. She didn't retrieve her security token. She didn't make a sound. She walked back down the long corridor, rode the elevator down to the silent lobby, and stepped out into the rainy downtown night. The game was no longer about love. It was about absolute destruction. And she had 72 hours to lay her traps. The next 72 hours before the wedding required a masterclass in psychological warfare and absolute self-control. To the outside world, Elena was the picture of a radiant, serene bride, consumed by final dress fittings, menu tastings, and the joyful chaos of preparing for the most important day of her life. When Julian smiled at her across the breakfast table, praising her beauty and whispering sweet assurances about their future, she smiled right back. Her eyes held the exact warmth, adoration, and absolute trust he expected to see. Not a single muscle in her face betrayed the freezing storm raging underneath. 2 days before the ceremony, Julian brought home the final corporate restructuring folder. It was a thick, leather-bound document stamped with gold lettering, containing the absolute assignment of all intellectual property rights, algorithmic code ownership, and controlling voting shares of EcoGrid Solutions over to Vanguard Holdings. "Just a routine pre-wedding formality, my love," Julian purred smoothly, wrapping his arms around her waist as she sat at her desk. "To merge our assets, protect our tax brackets, and secure our financial empire together. My lawyers prepared everything. Just sign on the designated lines, and we can leave all this corporate stress behind us forever." Elena looked down at the document. She didn't hesitate for a single second. With a steady, elegant hand, she picked up her fountain pen and signed her name cleanly on every single required line, handing the folder back to him with a soft, adoring gaze. Julian beamed with toxic triumph, kissing her cheek. He believed he had won total, unchallengeable victory. What Julian was far too arrogant to notice, and what his expensive corporate lawyers completely missed in their haste, was the micro-addendum embedded deep within page 14 of the corporate charter. The very night she heard them conspiring in his office, Elena had secretly retained the services of one of the country's most ruthless corporate intellectual property attorneys. Together, they drafted a legally ironclad hidden activation clause. The clause explicitly stipulated that any transfer of core software rights, algorithmic patents, or controlling equity executed under verifiable corporate fraud, hidden bad faith, material misrepresentation, or coercion would instantly nullify the entire transaction. Furthermore, upon public activation by the primary creator, 100% of the proprietary technology and voting shares would automatically revert back to her absolute ownership, while permanently freezing all associated corporate accounts under federal anti-fraud provisions. He thought he was signing her death warrant. In reality, he had just handed her the legal detonator to blow his entire empire sky high. The stage was set. every invitation had been sent. Every trap was laid. The morning of the wedding arrived, transforming the historic downtown cathedral into a breathtaking spectacle of high society luxury. The soaring Gothic arches were draped in cascading white roses and eucalyptus leaves. The pews were packed to capacity with an elite guest list. Silicon Valley venture capitalists, global tech moguls, prominent politicians, high-profile journalists, and close family members. Flashbulbs strobed continuously in the grand foyer, capturing every immaculate detail of the opulent event. And then, the heavy, wrought-iron double doors of the cathedral swung open. Absolute silence fell over the massive hall, heavier than a physical weight. Elena stood framed in the doorway. She was a vision of devastating, breathtaking elegance in her custom-designed haute couture wedding gown, which flowed down the steps like liquid silver and white silk. But there was no nervous flutter in her posture. Her shoulders were back, her chin held high, and her eyes radiated a cold, razor-sharp clarity. She began walking down the long aisle alone. Waiting at the altar stood Julian. He looked every bit the proud, untouchable tech titan in his bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, practically glowing with the arrogant triumph of a man who believed he had outsmarted the world. Today, he was cementing his legacy, securing public adoration as a brilliant visionary and a devoted family man, all funded by a woman he planned to discard by nightfall. Beside him stood Victoria, draped in an expensive designer dress, offering a smug, hidden smirk as Elena approached. The elderly priest's solemn, resonant voice echoed through the soaring arches. "Do you, Julian, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health for as long as you both shall live?" Julian smiled, his voice ringing out clear, confident, and smooth across the silent cathedral. "I do, Father." A murmur of approval rippled through the front rows. The priest turned his gaze toward Elena, offering a warm, grandfatherly smile. "And do you, Elena, take this man?" Elena stopped dead in her tracks, exactly 3 paces from the altar. She did not flinch. Slowly, deliberately, she reached up and lifted the delicate lace veil from her face. Her eyes locked onto Julian's, not with the soft, adoring gaze of a blind bride, but with the chilling detachment of an executioner. Without breaking eye contact, she reached into the intricate beadwork of her bridal bouquet, pulled out a sleek, matte black remote control, and pressed a single button. Instantly, the massive cathedral projector screens, discreetly rigged the night before by her private engineering team under the guise of a romantic memory montage, flickered to life behind the altar. Instead of childhood photographs or tender dating snapshots, the room was flooded with crystal-clear audio waveforms and high-definition video recordings. The entire congregation heard the unmistakable booming voice of Julian echoing from the surround sound speakers, bouncing off the sacred stone walls. "You seriously think I'm marrying her for love? Her green tech startup is the only reason my holding company isn't currently burning to ash in bankruptcy court. I needed her brains and her capital to bail me out." Gasps ripped through the crowd like an electric shock. Flashbulbs went wild as reporters, bloggers, and stunned billionaires whipped out their phones. Julian's face drained of every drop of color in a single microsecond, turning a sickly, ghostly gray as he spun around, paralyzed with absolute horror. Beside him, Victoria dropped her ceremonial bouquet, her hands flying to her mouth as the murmurs erupted into a deafening wall of public outrage. With a voice that cut through the chaos like shattering glass, Elena stepped forward, looking right into Julian's wide, terrified eyes. "No, I don't." She reached into the hidden folds of her white gown, pulled out a thick, legal-bound manila folder stamped with federal court seals, and tossed it casually onto the marble steps of the altar, right at the polished shoes of the lead international venture capitalist, a billionaire who had been primed to wire $20 million into Julian's corporate accounts that very afternoon. Those are the certified federal audit reports detailing your corporate fraud, hidden asset stripping, and systemic financial manipulation," Elena announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the entire church. "And attached to them is the legal addendum from our corporate charter. It explicitly voids any ownership transfer executed under fraud and coercion, instantly returning 100% of the intellectual property, patents, and controlling shares back to the primary creator." She turned her gaze slightly, addressing the paralyzed investors in the front rows directly. "Effective 4 minutes ago, my legal team filed the federal injunction. His corporate accounts are frozen, his assets are seized, and the empire he built on lies has just been stripped down to bare concrete." Julian lunged forward, his voice cracking with panic, sweat pouring down his pale face. "Elena, wait, please. This is a terrible misunderstanding. We can fix this in private. Don't do this." Elena didn't even blink. She looked at him the way a master surgeon looks at a cancerous growth ready for excision. "Your company is liquidated, Julian. Your career is over, and your lies have caught up with you. Enjoy the silence." Without another word, she turned on her heel. The long, flawless train of her white gown swept past him as she walked back down the aisle, leaving him utterly shattered, kneeling amidst the wreckage of his own monumental greed, while hundreds of camera shutters flashed relentlessly in his face, capturing the final, unmasked moment of his utter destruction.